There are moments in life when the noise inside us grows louder than anything happening around us. Moments when the weight of unanswered questions settles quietly in the chest, and we begin to wonder if we have lost the ability to feel guided. It is in these quiet, heavy spaces that the search for faith and surrender begins, not as an abstract spiritual ideal, but as a desperate longing for inner relief. Many people watching this now have carried years of emotional tension, trying to hold every piece of life together, while fearing that if they loosen their grip for even a moment, everything will fall apart. Yet this constant vigilance slowly erodes our connection to the universe, creating a sense of isolation that only deepens over time. Today, this video invites you to walk a different path, one where surrender is not weakness, but a return to alignment with a higher intelligence that has been whispering to you all along. As you move through each chapter of this journey, you will be asked to explore the parts of yourself that resist letting go, not to judge them, but to understand their origin and transform the way you relate to them. Stay with this process, breathe into it, and allow the depth of the message to reach you. And before we continue, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your reflections in the comments so we can walk this path of awakening together. There are times when the fear you carry does not appear dramatically, but rather as a quiet presence that follows you through each day, shaping your decisions without announcing itself. It lingers beneath your thoughts when you wake up, when you look at your life and feel that something essential is missing, when you breathe and sense an invisible barrier between you and the peace you crave. This fear behaves like a veil placed gently over the mind, a veil so familiar that you may not even notice it is there, yet it blurs your ability to trust, to listen, to surrender, to imagine that the universe is truly on your side. In many ways, fear becomes a spiritual blindfold, not because it is evil or wrong, but because it forms from pieces of your past that have not yet been held with compassion. Before surrender becomes possible, this blindfold must be understood for what it is: a protective mechanism built during seasons of pain, uncertainty, or abandonment. When someone feels disconnected from their essence, it rarely happens overnight. It usually begins with a series of small disappointments that accumulate quietly. One day a promise is broken, another day a dream fractures, later a relationship ends without closure. Eventually the person no longer knows where hope is supposed to come from. The longing for guidance intensifies, but so does the doubt. A part of them reaches for the universe, another part believes the universe is silent. The conflict between these two impulses creates an emotional fog that makes it difficult to sense any form of higher direction. Instead of feeling supported, the person feels suspended, as if standing on a bridge between two worlds without the courage to move forward. Fear in this sense becomes the body's attempt to protect the heart from further disappointment. It whispers that surrender is dangerous, that letting go will make everything collapse, that trusting a higher intelligence leaves you vulnerable. These whispers grow louder when someone has lived through seasons of emotional abandonment, spiritual disillusionment, or prolonged periods without feeling progress. The mind begins to rehearse every possible outcome, as if preparing for danger could prevent future heartbreak. Yet this vigilance creates a vibration of tension that gradually blocks the connection the person longs for. The universe is not silent. The mind is simply too loud. This internal resistance often expresses itself through subtle patterns. A person may avoid making decisions that could change their life because uncertainty feels threatening. Another may cling to familiar suffering because it feels safer than the unknown. Some continually seek spiritual content, but rarely integrate it into their daily life because the leap from understanding to embodiment requires trusting in energies they cannot control. Others set intentions for abundance, love, or healing, but immediately doubt whether they deserve what they are asking for. This doubt, though quiet, sends a message into their vibrational field, a message that says, "I am not sure I can receive." What deepens this struggle is the belief that fear indicates spiritual failure. Many people assume that if they were truly aligned, they would not feel afraid. Yet fear is not the enemy. It is a compass pointing toward the places where healing is needed. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to gently unmask it, to understand the stories it repeats and the wounds it guards. Spiritual awakening is not achieved by suppressing discomfort, but by walking toward it with presence and honesty. When someone allows themselves to feel the depth of their fear without collapsing into it, they create space for awareness to emerge. This awareness reveals that inner resistance often forms from emotions that were never fully expressed. Grief that was never mourned, loneliness that was never admitted, anger that was pushed aside because it felt unacceptable. These emotions do not disappear. They settle into the subconscious and shape the way a person interprets life. They create assumptions that become invisible truths. I will be left again. I cannot trust good things. The universe does not hear me. If I surrender, I will lose control. These beliefs operate quietly, influencing the person's energetic field more strongly than any affirmation they speak aloud. As this happens, the person may begin to notice a persistent feeling of stagnation. Even when they attempt to manifest their desires, the process feels heavy rather than expansive. This heaviness is not a sign of failure, but an indication that the internal environment is misaligned with the vision they are trying to call into form. Manifestation requires coherence between thought, emotion, and intention. When fear dominates the emotional landscape, intention loses its power, not because the universe rejects it, but because the person is not fully available to receive what they are asking for. To understand this resistance is to recognize that spiritual connection is not something earned, it is something remembered. The universe does not withdraw when someone feels lost. It remains constant, steady, patient. What shifts is the person's ability to perceive its presence. When fear becomes the dominant filter through which life is interpreted, the world appears hostile, unpredictable, and disconnected. But when the blindfold begins to lift, even slightly, the person notices subtle moments of alignment that were always there, a quiet intuition, a gentle synchronicity, a sudden sense of clarity at an unexpected moment. The process of lifting this blindfold does not require force. It requires honesty, compassion, and the willingness to sit with the parts of yourself that have been waiting to be acknowledged. When someone begins to observe their fear without becoming it, something extraordinary happens. The fear softens, the body relaxes, the heart opens just enough to let a different frequency in, and in that opening, the whisper of the universe becomes audible again. This chapter is an invitation to notice where fear has shaped your perception, not to judge it, but to understand it as a story that can be rewritten. The deeper truth is that your connection to the universe never disappeared. It was simply obscured by protective layers formed during times of pain. As we move forward into the next chapters, the blindfold will begin to loosen. You will learn how surrender is not the release of responsibility, but the release of fear's authority. And when that shift begins, even slightly, the path to higher consciousness becomes not only possible but inevitable. There are moments when the heart begins to reveal truths the mind has spent years ignoring. Moments when the familiar tension in the chest no longer feels like simple stress, but rather a sign of misalignment between the inner world and the life being lived. This tension often appears in cycles: a sudden heaviness in the morning, a quiet ache before sleep, an unspoken fear that things will not change no matter how much effort is applied. These sensations are not random. They are the body's way of signaling that something essential has drifted out of coherence. Surrender begins here, not as a grand spiritual act, but as the recognition that holding everything alone has become too heavy. In this recognition, the body softens, even if slightly, and a different kind of intelligence begins to emerge, one that does not shout or demand clarity, but whispers through the rhythms of breath and the quiet spaces between thoughts. When emotional coherence is disrupted, the mind and heart move in opposite directions. The mind insists on certainty, strategies, and prediction, while the heart longs for stillness, trust, and the freedom to feel without fear. This internal contradiction creates a fractured vibrational field, one in which the outer voice speaks of faith, but the inner frequency vibrates doubt. Many who seek spiritual growth feel trapped in this divide. They want to trust, yet their nervous system remains prepared for loss. They want to receive, yet their body remains braced against disappointment. This is why surrender cannot be approached solely from the intellect. The body must also be brought into the experience of safety, or the mind will continue fighting battles that no longer exist. Coherence, in its essence, is when thought, emotion, and intention begin to move as one. It is a state in which the body no longer interprets life as a threat, allowing energy to flow without obstruction. Although often associated with scientific language, Coherence can be understood in much simpler and more intimate terms. Imagine the difference between walking through life with clenched fists and walking with open hands. The actions may appear identical from a distance, but the internal experience is entirely different. The clenched fists represent survival mode, a body expecting conflict or loss. The open hands represent a body that feels safe enough to participate in life without resisting its natural rhythm. True surrender requires this openness, not as a performance, but as a lived sensation. Many people assume surrender means abandoning responsibility, but it is the opposite. It means shifting from a state of internal fragmentation to a state of unity, where the heart is not contradicting the mind and the mind is not drowning out the heart. When this unity begins to form, even subtly, the field around a person changes. Thoughts become clearer, intuition becomes sharper, and decisions feel less like guesses and more like gentle alignments with something larger. Some call this alignment a shift in vibration. Others describe it as grace. Regardless of the name, the experience is unmistakable. There is a feeling of being carried rather than pushed, of being accompanied rather than isolated. This shift is often first noticed in the body. The breath begins to deepen without forcing it. The shoulders loosen. The stomach, once tight, becomes more receptive. The mind begins to release the false urgency that once governed every moment. These changes may seem small, but they signal a profound transformation. The nervous system is learning that it no longer needs to brace against life. It is learning that surrender is safe. When the body feels safe, the heart begins to guide more boldly. When the heart guides, higher consciousness becomes accessible. The idea of energetic alignment can feel abstract until it is grounded in emotion. Alignment is not about achieving a perfect state of positivity. It is about truth. A person who admits grief is more aligned than someone who pretends to be joyful. A person who sits with their fear rather than denying it is closer to surrender than someone who recites spiritual concepts without feeling them. The universe responds to authenticity, not performance. Honest emotion carries a frequency that moves through the energetic field without distortion. This is why moments of vulnerability often precede moments of awakening. Vulnerability strips away the false layers and reveals what is real. As coherence deepens, a new relationship with intuition begins to form. Intuition is not a dramatic voice or a burst of supernatural insight. Often it is a quiet knowing that arises when the internal noise has softened enough for truth to be heard. It can appear as a subtle shift in the chest, a sense of warmth, a clarity that comes without explanation, or a release of tension when a thought aligns with the deeper self. Many people overlook intuition because it feels too gentle compared to the intensity of fear. But intuition does not compete. It waits. It speaks most clearly when surrender has created the space for its presence to be felt. This chapter would not be complete without acknowledging the emotional weight that often precedes alignment. Before coherence is restored, there is usually a period of unraveling. Old beliefs surface. Pain long suppressed rises to be acknowledged. The person may feel temporarily more lost, not because they are failing, but because the blindfold is loosening. The truth becomes visible before it becomes comfortable. The heart opens before it feels safe. These transitional states are often misunderstood as setbacks, when in truth, they are invitations into deeper surrender. The mind resists because it prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom. The heart, however, recognizes the moment as a return home. To walk this path is to remember that higher consciousness is not a destination, but a state of being created moment by moment through presence, integrity, and openness. Surrender is not a one-time choice, but a continuous movement toward coherence. Each time the body relaxes, each time the heart is honest, each time the mind releases its grip on an imagined outcome, alignment strengthens. Little by little, the person begins to experience life not as an adversary, but as a companion. And in this companionship, the universe becomes less of a distant idea and more of an intimate presence guiding the way. There are seasons in life when the passage of time feels almost like a quiet adversary, a force that seems to stretch endlessly when we long for movement and accelerate when we hope for rest. In these seasons, the heart often contracts with a mixture of impatience and fear, wondering whether life has forgotten our desires or misplaced our prayers. The more someone waits for something deeply longed for, the heavier the silence becomes. And in that silence, the mind begins to craft stories of inadequacy or misalignment, imagining that if the outcome has not arrived, something must be wrong. Yet this very tension reveals the central misunderstanding that keeps so many people spiritually exhausted: the belief that life should move according to the rhythms of human expectation rather than the wisdom of universal intelligence. The illusion of control is comforting at first because it gives the mind the impression that certainty can be manufactured through planning, calculating, or forcing outcomes. But beneath this illusion lies a deeper exhaustion that often goes unspoken. Human beings are not meant to sustain a constant state of vigilance, nor are they designed to micromanage the unfolding of destiny. When someone tries to control the timing of their life, they inadvertently restrict the very flow that is meant to carry them toward transformation. Control becomes a shield that feels protective, but quietly obstructs the natural movement of their spiritual evolution. Over time, this shield becomes heavy, and the weight of it presses against the heart in ways the person may not fully recognize. Life has its own rhythm, a rhythm that does not rush simply because the mind demands it, nor delay simply to test someone's patience. The universe does not operate through human urgency. It operates through alignment. When circumstances appear stalled, it is rarely because nothing is happening. More often, the unseen groundwork is being prepared, foundations are being strengthened, or the person is being shaped internally to support what they are asking to receive. Many interpret this period as rejection, yet it is closer to a silent rearrangement that protects the integrity of what is coming. The mind sees delay, the soul sees calibration. This internal calibration is one of the most misunderstood parts of the spiritual journey. People often assume that when something does not manifest immediately, they have failed energetically or spiritually. But nothing could be further from the truth. Timing is not a test of worthiness. It is an expression of wisdom. If certain things arrive too early, they collapse under the pressure of an unprepared heart. If they arrive too late, the spirit may have already begun to close in on itself. The universe seeks neither haste nor stagnation, but harmony. And harmony requires readiness. Readiness, in turn, requires surrender. The difficulty lies in the space between desire and manifestation, that mysterious interval where doubt tends to flourish. It is in this interval that many people begin to lose confidence, interpreting the quiet as absence rather than gestation. Yet the soul often learns the most in the spaces where nothing seems to change. These spaces teach patience, resilience, trust, and introspection. They expose the fears that were hidden beneath urgency. They reveal the places where attachment has taken root, and above all, they soften the heart enough to allow a deeper form of guidance to emerge. Without these intervals of stillness, a person might race so quickly toward visible outcomes that they miss the subtle invitations life offers along the way. There is a moment in every journey where the mind reaches the limit of what it can control. This moment can feel like breaking, but it is actually a beginning. When the mind finally stops insisting on its own timeline, an entirely different intelligence can step forward. This intelligence does not speak through fear or pressure. It speaks through intuition, synchronicity, and gentle alignment. The person begins to notice small signs that previously would have gone unnoticed: a sentence overheard at the right moment, a sudden inner knowing, a shift in emotion without explanation, or an opportunity that appears unexpectedly. These moments are not coincidences. They are reminders that the universe is not distant but responsive, weaving together experiences that guide the soul toward what it is ready to receive. Trusting the timing of the universe requires the courage to acknowledge that certainty is not the foundation of spiritual life. Presence is. Control is the mind's attempt to escape vulnerability. Surrender is the heart's willingness to inhabit it. When someone stops fighting the unknown, they create room for unexpected solutions to emerge. When they stop demanding answers, clarity begins to rise from within. And when they release the timeline they thought life should follow, they open the door to possibilities far greater than the ones they had imagined. This is not passivity. It is participation without constriction, allowing life to meet them halfway. The path becomes even more profound when one realizes that the timing of experiences often reveals the depth of their purpose. Pain arrives when it can teach. Healing arrives when it can land. Opportunities arrive when the person has grown into the version of themselves capable of sustaining them. Even detours carry significance, for they expose the very parts of the psyche that would have sabotaged joy had it arrived earlier. The universe is far too intelligent to deliver a gift at the wrong time, and far too compassionate to withhold what the soul is genuinely ready to receive. To release the illusion of control is not to abandon desire. It is to free desire from fear. It is to allow longing to exist without the pressure of urgency. It is to trust that what is meant to find you cannot be lost. And as this trust deepens, a new sense of relationship with life begins to form. The person no longer feels alone in their journey. Instead, they feel accompanied, guided, supported by something vast and quiet, and intimately aware of their path. The heart, once strained by impatience, begins to soften. The mind, once frantic for answers, begins to listen. And in this softening, a subtle recognition dawns. The universe was never late. It was waiting for the moment when you could finally receive. There is a quiet turning point in every spiritual journey, when the longing for transformation begins to reach beyond ideas and enters the intimate landscape of daily life. It happens subtly, often without announcement, in moments that seem ordinary. A pause before speaking, a breath taken more slowly than usual, a sudden awareness of how tense the body has become. These small moments reveal something essential. They show that awakening does not wait for grand revelations or extraordinary experiences. It begins in the most human spaces, in the rhythms of a life that is still messy, uncertain, and unfinished. Faith and surrender become real, not through isolated insights, but through the way someone chooses to inhabit their own existence hour by hour, breath by breath. In this space, the person begins to notice the subtle ways they have been negotiating with life, holding back parts of themselves, or pretending to be stronger than they feel. They start to observe how often they react out of old patterns rather than genuine presence. This awareness is not meant to create shame, but to open the heart to the truth that transformation is not a performance. It is a slow and tender unfolding that requires honesty with the self. The rituals that anchor faith are not external acts performed for spiritual approval. They are inner gestures of returning to one's essence, of choosing depth over speed, presence over urgency, and truth over avoidance. There are mornings when the body wakes, carrying the residue of yesterday's doubt, and even simple movement feels heavy. On these days, surrender takes the form of meeting oneself gently, without rushing toward productivity or pretending clarity where none exists. There are evenings when exhaustion reveals the places where emotional wounds still pulse quietly, asking to be acknowledged rather than pushed aside. In these moments, faith becomes less about belief and more about willingness. The willingness to sit with the parts of oneself that have been waiting for years to be heard. When someone allows themselves to experience their own truth without judgment, they create the internal space where divine guidance can finally reach them. As this inner space expands, the person begins to feel life differently. They notice the way silence holds meaning, the way intuition whispers in subtle sensations, the way a simple breath can loosen the heaviness that once felt immovable. Instead of trying to impose order on everything, they begin to listen for the natural order already present. This listening becomes a way of being, a quiet form of devotion that does not require rituals of perfection, but rituals of presence. Each moment of awareness becomes a doorway to deeper alignment, not because the moment is extraordinary, but because the person is finally fully inside it. There is also the recognition that not every day will feel spiritually elevated. Some days, the mind will spiral into fear. Other days, the heart will feel closed or numb. But rather than interpreting these fluctuations as failure, the person begins to see them as part of the human landscape, as weather patterns moving through a larger sky. Faith becomes the anchor that keeps them steady during emotional storms. Surrender becomes the acceptance that storms are not signs of spiritual regression, but opportunities for deeper grounding. In the same way that nature cycles through seasons without resistance, the inner world also cycles, and these cycles are not obstacles but companions on the path of awakening. The presence of these cycles encourages a more compassionate approach to oneself. The person starts to understand that healing does not unfold in straight lines. There are moments of clarity, followed by moments of confusion, breakthroughs followed by quiet retreats inward. Each stage carries its own purpose. Confusion prompts introspection. Clarity offers direction. Breakthroughs create expansion. Retreats allow integration. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. The path becomes less about reaching a destination and more about experiencing the fullness of each phase without losing connection to the deeper self. Within this evolving relationship with daily life, surrender begins to express itself not as passive acceptance but as a form of active trust. It is the trust that intuition can be followed even when it does not provide explanations. It is the trust that the heart can be opened even when vulnerability feels risky. It is the trust that letting go of old identities does not erase the self, but reveals the self more completely. This trust does not arise instantly. It grows slowly, through experiences that reinforce the truth that the universe responds to authenticity with clarity and to openness with gentle guidance. Daily awareness also brings attention to the subtle choices that shape a person's energy. Choices about what thoughts to linger on, what emotions to breathe through rather than suppress, what conversations nourish the soul, and which ones drain it. These choices are not moral judgments, but energetic ones, determining the frequency from which someone lives. When a person consistently chooses resonance over resistance, they begin to notice a quiet shift in their inner world. Their emotional landscape becomes less chaotic, their reactions become less impulsive, and their capacity to remain present expands naturally. What makes this chapter particularly transformative is the understanding that spiritual growth is not separate from earthly responsibilities. The way someone speaks to others, the way they respond to conflict, the way they care for their physical body, all become extensions of their inner state. Surrender shows up in the softness with which they speak, in the patience they offer to difficult situations, in the way they release old narratives that once shaped their identity. Faith shows up in their willingness to take steps forward, even when the outcome is uncertain, trusting that each step carries meaning even if it does not yet reveal its purpose. In time, this way of living begins to feel less like effort and more like alignment. Life stops being something to control and becomes something to collaborate with. The heart becomes less guarded, and intuition becomes more familiar. The body feels less like a battlefield and more like a sanctuary. And through this gentle reorientation, the person discovers something they may have forgotten along the way. The universe has always been participating in their life. It was never waiting for perfection, only for presence. It was never asking for certainty, only for honesty. And as presence and honesty deepen, the path of faith and surrender becomes not an aspiration, but a lived experience, woven seamlessly into the rhythm of daily life. There comes a moment in every journey of awakening when the teachings shift from concepts to embodiment, when the distance between who you have been and who you are becoming begins to narrow in ways that feel both subtle and profound. Throughout this exploration of faith and surrender, one truth has remained constant: the path toward higher consciousness is not a straight line, but a living, breathing experience shaped by your willingness to meet yourself with honesty and compassion. You have walked through fear, through silence, through resistance, and through the tender spaces where certainty dissolves and a deeper presence emerges. Each chapter has revealed that surrender is not the abandonment of desire, but the softening of the grip that once suffocated it. Faith, in turn, is not blind optimism, but a quiet remembrance that you are held by a greater intelligence even when you cannot feel its hands around you. In this unfolding, you have seen that coherence is not perfection, it is integration. It is the moment when the heart, mind, and body begin to move in the same direction, opening the door to a relationship with the universe that is intimate rather than distant. Through patience, awareness, and vulnerability, the old patterns that once shaped your path begin to fall away, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer needed where you are going. What remains is a steady sense of inner grounding, a recognition that you do not walk alone, and that every breath, every hesitation, every breakthrough is part of a larger conversation between your soul and the infinite field that surrounds you. If there is one truth to carry forward, let it be this: the universe does not ask for perfection or certainty, it asks for presence. And when you offer that presence, even imperfectly, the path ahead becomes illuminated in ways you could not have imagined before. Surrender is not the end of your journey. It is the doorway into the life your soul has been waiting to live. Before you leave this space, allow one question to echo within you with the depth it deserves. What part of you is finally ready to stop fighting life and begin walking with it? This single question has the power to realign your next steps, your healing, and the way you interpret the silent guidance that surrounds you every day. If this journey touched something real inside you, if it helped you feel less alone and more connected to a greater intelligence shaping your path, then I invite you to continue walking with us. Subscribe to this channel so you never lose access to the teachings that keep your heart open and your soul grounded. And when the video ends, stay with the energy you cultivated here. Continue watching the next message waiting for you on the final screen. Your awakening is already in motion. Let it unfold fully.